As promised, I am working on a springboard series to help spring you forth and more deeply into a personal tarot practice. If you are someone who is tarot curious, just getting started, or wanting to breathe some fresh air and life into your personal practice. So welcome back. If you do not yet have a deck, you might want to check out my earlier video of this series, which dispels the myth around having to wait around for someone to gift you a deck and helps you get started on where you might find a deck or what type of deck you might want to get started with. So now you have a deck. Let's say you have a deck in your hot little hands. You're like, okay, great, just now what? So again, there's probably a lot of myths that you may have been invited into paying some attention to. And that is that you have to store your deck in a particular way, such as in special silk cloth, or it must be underneath your pillow for X amount of days, or always on your person or your body in like a carrying bag, or wherever you go, it must go with you. And again, I say baloney, bah humbug, you do you. There's no right or wrong way, and very few shoulds or should nots in developing a personal tarot practice. Now, when you get your deck, if you're waiting for it or it has arrived, it's most likely going to be in a box with a removable lid, or in what's called a tuck box, where it has, this kind of flappy flap up top, and you remove your deck. It may also come in a tin. There are some decks that come in a tin where if you are really worried about keeping it protected and you do want to carry it with you everywhere you go, a tin might be a good option for you. You may decide to store your deck in like a drawstring bag, and there's amazing, cute, all kinds of artistic versions of pouches and bags that you could find, for example, through Etsy. There's people on Instagram that you could be finding. I'm sure in YouTube land too, if you want to be supporting, independent artists and small businesses. I would recommend going to any of those three places, Instagram, YouTube, or Etsy, to see who you might find to support them and to give your deck a special home if you're called to. You don't have to. It can stay in the box. Now, there's some myth around it having to be wrapped in special silk. Okay, this is not silk, but I do have a deck that I keep. It just asked to be wrapped in cloth, and so when my decks speak loudly and assertively, I definitely listen. So this one really wanted to be in cloth. This one did ask to be in a drawstring bag. I have some that are in the drawer. I have an altar next to my bed with a little drawer. Some of them are stacked in there. Some are no longer in their original boxes. Some still are. I mean, everything goes. So these are some options. So you have your deck, and you have maybe decided how you want to store it, and you now have permission to do it however you want to. You do you. I'll keep saying that. Now, you might also have some concern on how you're going to cleanse or clear your deck. You don't have to. Frankly, that's option number one. You say, that's a bunch of malarkey, and you don't worry about that. I personally do cleanse my decks. I do that as soon as I purchase one. I spend some time with my deck, clearing it, cleansing it, bonding with it. We can talk about that in a little bit. Also, between client readings, I do some things to clear the deck. I oftentimes will put my decks out underneath a full moon to clear them and charge them. So there's clearing and charging, to kind of dispel any energy, kind of reset them and charge them up. And there's different ways to do that. So let me show you a few techniques. So there is, let's get a deck out so you can see. So some ways that people will cleanse a deck is through through smoke cleansing, through the burning of herbs. Now, if you are going to elect to do that as your technique, I'm going to gently encourage you to be very mindful and to maybe do some research around that. There are a lot of issues with some of the herbs and techniques that we are utilizing in our community. Some of the smoke cleansing options are culturally appropriative, are harmful because of certain things being endangered. So again, you want to be mindful. If you are now starting a practice right now, why not do it in the most culturally sensitive and mindful way as possible? So I would say no to white sage, no to Palo Santo, and say yes to some herbs that you've grown in your garden or that you can get at your local store or from small purveyors, right? Rosemary might be a nice option. You might want to look at your own lineage to see what kind of herbs have been utilized depending on your own personal background. If you have access to that information, you may want to look to see what grows locally in your area that would be appropriate to use. So just a little public service announcement right there. Since you are just now starting your practice, I wanted you to be aware of that, and you can be researching white sage and Palo Santo so you can learn for yourself as to why it's problematic, especially if you are a white reader. Okay, so to get back to this, so instead of smoke cleansing, or in addition to, or just depending on the mood or the situation, you can use sound. Now, there's lots of different sounds you could use. I personally just have a little bell that I oftentimes use. If I don't have access to my bell, I'll sometimes use snaps. You could be imagining doing like a visualization technique where a colored light or energy or a combination of the two, I'm assuming it's kind of like the same, is coming from your hands and into the deck. Maybe you are doing some sort of a rearranging of it to just kind of get everything all mixed up as part of, kind of like the pre-shuffle before you're shuffling and working with your deck and inviting cards to step forward. I have read, which I have now done several times because I found it so interesting. Oh, hello, card at the bottom, 4 of Wands, very celebratory. Thanks for being here in community, very like a celebratory community card. You could reorder the deck back into order, like put in all the suits back in order from ace to 10, the court cards, going from page to king, the major arcana from 0 to 21. So you could reorder everything, and that could be a way of kind of like cleaning it, clearing it, and resetting it. You could also put it out on a windowsill or outside in sunlight, again on a windowsill or outside, or somewhere by a window, to working with moon phases. The full moon can be a really powerful time, or around the new moon. Crystals, again, wanting to do a quick little PSA announcement that to just be mindful about crystals, being mined not always ethically, not always sourced ethically, to be mindful about where your rocks and crystals are coming from and maybe how many you are using or whatever. So just a quick little that there. I mean, obviously I have some. I have stopped buying new ones and just working with the ones that I have because of those issues. But selenite can be a really great one for cleansing. And I oftentimes, between client readings, will make sure I kind of reshuffle a little bit, just kind of like a shuffle clearing. I will kind of spin my cards around like this, and then I will resort it back. Again, if you're somebody who just kind of likes to have a starting point, put the selenite on it and use the bell. It's kind of, signaling that the reading from client A is over, that all the energies and information and messages that had come through were appreciated, and honoring that. But now somebody new is coming in, and just kind of like resetting them and kind of like talking to the deck, letting it know what's going on. So there's a few techniques for clearing it, for cleaning it. Now for bonding, this can be part of the bonding process too. But you have your new deck. There's several ways to bond. One really great way is to simply look at the cards and to say hello to them, to maybe talk to them and say, hello deck, hi. Introduce yourself. That can be all in your head, or you can actually, it can be very powerful to speak words, to use our voice, to use the air element. And, introduce yourself and say how you're excited that they're here with you, that you're looking forward to being in relationship, into partnership, however that might feel comfortable for you. So you can start doing something like that. And again, just looking at the cards. I would encourage you not to look at the little white book that's going to come with your deck, or that has showed up with your deck yet, if you're just now getting started. If you have, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I understand wanting to gobble up all the information. And when I say little white book, it sometimes is truly that. Teeny tiny little white pamphlet with a few keywords. Sometimes it's not white, and sometimes it's not little. Sometimes it's thick and it's huge, and it's actually the size of a book that you would have on your bookshelf. Sometimes there's no little white book, and you are directed to a website to find out some of the keywords that the creator feels is associated with the deck. But before you do that, you might just want to get to know the art and get to know the cards and see what comes forward for you. So looking at the cards would be a great start for that. You can look at color. You can look at figures. You can look at, is there action? Is it static? What else is in there? How are they playing off? And we'll go more into depth with that. But just to say hello, you might just kind of want to take a look at them and just kind of see what you are feeling, seeing, what you're connecting to, what the cards remind you of. So that's a great way to start bonding. You can also do what's called an interview spread with your deck. And there's great resources. If you were to Google interview tarot deck spread, you would have a whole bunch of options. And that can be a really great way to get to know your deck. It might also be kind of overwhelming if you don't yet know what kinds of meanings you have assigned to the cards. So if you do that, you can just kind of do it intuitively based on the imagery and any labeling that's on the card. You can also then go to your little white book and read about it. You can also go to some online resources. There's no right or wrong way. But if it feels really overwhelming, then honor that and maybe take some pictures, jot down some notes, and maybe come back to it, or just do one card at a time. And that might be a really great way to get started for your first week. Now, also for bonding with your deck, there's a lot of people will do, which is called a daily practice, which might be pulling 1, 2, or 3 cards per day, not as a big elaborate spread, but just kind of a check-in, or to study, or to meditate, or to pull a card, or to, at the end of the day, to reflect back. And again, we'll go into that into more details later. But this is how you can get started with 1, storing your deck. Anything goes. What you do want to make sure you're doing is keeping it out of the way of pets and animals. I have friends who've had their decks chomped up by a little puppy with really sharp teeth. You'll want to make sure that if you are putting it outside in sunlight or in moonlight, that it's protected and it's not being damaged by rain or snow, anything like that. Again, inside you'll want to make sure it's protected from spills and things like that. So in that case, it does make sense in terms of protection that there would be a box or a cloth or a drawstring bag, or being stored even loose, in a drawer of some sort. So you're saying hello to your deck, you're deciding how you want to store it, and you can change your mind at all times. And then figuring out a way just to kind of say hello and say, we're in partnership now, kind of clearing out the energy of wherever your deck was before by doing several things. Again, you could use some smoke cleansing, being thoughtful and mindful about where that's coming from. You can be working with crystals, being thoughtful and mindful as to where they're coming from and how you're working with them and how many. You can use sound, reordering, mixing them up, sunlight, moonlight, this music, anything goes. Experiment, experiment, experiment. Very few shoulds, very few should nots. Our next episode is going to dive into, okay, now you've probably heard some myths or suggestions or not around how to shuffle and start pulling cards. So we'll dive into that and show you some different techniques so that you can experiment and figure out what works best for you, and maybe you'll decide all of them. Until next time, tweet tweet.